There is nothing so contrary to the Christian life as overindulgence. Hello, I am Brother Francisco Whitaker, a Benedictine monk from St. Vincent Arch Abbey. Today, we're beginning our first part into monasticism and the 7 deadly sins, how St. Benedict and the early monastic fathers can help us in our struggle with temptation. Today, part 1, our first sin that we will talk about is gluttony. And the church fathers and the monastic fathers, and particularly St. Thomas Aquinas, actually present an order to the 7 deadly sins, kind of the pattern that the person, the individual, takes as they fall into sin. So the first one that one actually generally falls into, or one of the first most obvious things to have an inordinate use and desire of, and that's what really all of the sins are, an inordinate desire or use of, is something that is very natural to us, which is food and drink. So that gluttony is defined as the inordinate desire and use of food and drink. Probably most people associate gluttony with, excessive overeating or excessive drinking. And if you say, well, I'm not massively overweight, or I don't eat a ton of food, I'm not an alcoholic, I have a beer or a glass of wine every once in a while, it's not a big deal, I'm not a glutton. Well, St. Benedict and John Cassian, who was a very early monastic father who actually predates St. Benedict, would disagree that that's not all there is to gluttony. So we're going to dive into gluttony today. Chapter 39 and 40 of the Rule of St. Benedict speak about the proper amount of food and the proper amount of drink. And in these 2 small chapters, Benedict outlines how monks are to relate to this very natural need we have to eat and to drink. And one particular line that stands out is where he says that there is nothing so contrary to the Christian life as overindulgence. And particularly in a situation, in a lifestyle of monasticism, where we have given up material goods, we have given up sexual pleasure because we live vowed chastity and vowed celibacy, well, then what's kind of the last pleasure left over is gluttony. So Benedict is very clear that gluttony is a danger for monks. And really, it's a danger for everyone because food and drink are so necessary for us. And Benedict and John Cassian outline 4 types of gluttony that exist. We are pretty much used to only hearing about one, but there are 4. And those are gluttony of quantity, quality, time, and place. We'll speak about those 4 areas and how we can respond to them virtuously and through practical action. Number 1, gluttony of quantity. Now, this is probably the most obvious, which is to have more food or to have more drink than is possibly necessary for us. We obviously need to eat to sustain ourselves. And drinking, if it's water, milk, juice, whatever, that also is nutritious. It nourishes us. And even to some extent, alcohol can have some health benefits. They say red wine can have some benefits for the heart. But even Thomas Aquinas says that drinking, when not done excessively, can be good. It brings camaraderie. He says even drink to the point of hilarity, till it's funny. You're sharing a good time. You're growing in bonds with others. But gluttony of quantity is to take more than we possibly need. And this can be a very tempting place for situations like maybe we're at big parties or big celebrations, times to feast, that we have more than we need, so that we eat to the point of stuffing ourselves. Rather than sustaining, it's stuffing. So that's gluttony of quantity. Then something a lot more subtle is the gluttony of quality, which is where one might not eat an exorbitant amount of food, but the type of food or drink one eats is way too extravagant. Now, there are times, let's say like maybe a wedding or one's ordination, where it makes sense to have some more extravagance in the food and the drink one has, right? It's a big celebration. Christmas, Easter, things like that. But if you are going out to eat, not to eat a ton of food, but always to get the best steak, or I don't drink much, but I have top shelf bourbon. I have a very refined taste. It's kind of the colloquial, culturally acceptable gluttony of quality, is to be very picky and choosy about when one eats. And C.S. Lewis, in his book The Screwtape Letters, actually calls this the gluttony of delicacy. Well, one character says, well, I don't want tons of pastries with my tea, but I want the highest quality England has to provide me. So that one can begin to disdain those who eat lower or who don't eat as well. And might even forego eating what is set before them because, I'm too good for this. It's like a pride in gluttony. Then there is also gluttony of time. Now, what does that mean? Benedict says that monks should only eat at the scheduled hours. That the rule, the horarium, everything is scheduled in its proper place. And to eat outside of that place is to kind of assert your will upon the schedule and upon the community rather than letting God and the community take care of you. And by, grazing, snacking, always finding a time to be nourished, always making sure that we're fed and never hungry, we never have an opportunity to sacrifice, to offer something up. But also, we begin to take away from the time, commitment, or even the goods of others. If I'm constantly taking food from the monastery's kitchen off meal times, then when it actually comes for a meal, well, there might not be enough for everyone to go around. And Benedict would also point out, not only can it detract from other people, but there are times and places where eating at all might be gluttonous. Now, what does that mean? Well, okay, for example, a small glass of whiskey, on the rocks in the evening when you're maybe smoking a pipe or reading a good book, that's perfectly fine. But a glass of whiskey at 5 a.m. as soon as you wake up, even if it's only one, is too much. Drinking right when you wake up is at the wrong time. And it becomes gluttonous because something about it is to say, I need this now. I need it. Gluttony is to grasp, to take. I need, I want, I must have to fill me up. Rather than moderation of food and drink, which is, I need this to live. I don't live to eat or to need this. Not living to eat, but eating to live. And sometimes we eat or drink at the wrong times. A really good example, too, for Catholics is we are called by the church, commanded, in fact, to observe an hour fast from anything other than water or maybe medication if necessary before receiving communion. And a lot of people don't do that. And this includes chewing gum, by the way. People don't know that, but it does. So to eat anything in that time is not only breaking the command of the church, but it's to eat at an improper time. And so anything becomes gluttonous. Now, if you're sick or there's some health reasons, the church says, of course, then you need to eat something. If you're going to pass out, then we'd rather you eat. But if you're a normal, able-bodied, healthy person, you can go 1 hour without food. And we're not asking you to go an hour without water, food, and anything else. So, if eating in that time is to say, I must have, I want, and is a gluttonous. And finally, there is gluttony of place, which this is to expect or demand, wherever situation you are, the best that you could receive. And there's kind of a crossover between gluttony of place and gluttony of quality. So that maybe you go to someone's house and they have, a nice table spread, but it's not a lot. And there's a lot of mouths to feed in the family. The gluttony of place is to try to fill your plate up so that you feel full. But that detracts from other people. Where you are, maybe that's not gluttony of quantity because you're not eating to the point of throwing up like the ancient Romans. But it's a gluttony of place because you're now detracting from other people's needs. And also Benedict says that we should eat what is available to us wherever we are. So if a monastery is set up in the country, eat and drink what is available there. If it's closer to a city, eat and drink what's available there. Don't go out looking for things. Don't try to find what is better for me. Because he actually says it can harm the environment, trying to force to fill me up things that I demand rather than what's actually just right in front of me. So how do we respond to these areas of gluttony? Well, gluttony of quantity is pretty basic. Don't eat until you're full. In fact, take less than you would think you would need in order to feel full. Now, there are some days you need to eat a lot. Maybe you know you're going to be doing a lot of hard manual labor that day, or you don't know the next time you're going to eat because maybe it's going to be a distance. Obviously, fill up. But if it's lunch and you know that you're going to be eating dinner in 5 hours or less, don't get a full meal at Chick-fil-A. Get a sandwich. Get something so that maybe you feel a little hungry still. And that is actually harder, Benedict and John Cashin say, than not eating at all. Because not eating at all is like, oh, okay, I can kind of shut my brain off. I'm just not going to do it. But to eat halfway and still feel hungry, but then just say the rest, no, I'm going to pass, or I don't need any more, is very hard. But it teaches us moderation. It teaches us self-control. It teaches us temperance. For gluttony of quality and gluttony of place, Benedict says, eat what is set before you. Don't complain. Don't wish you had something else. Don't forgo it and then go find something else later when no one else is looking. Eat what is set before you. And don't complain. Benedict really associates gossiping or grumbling, and he actually calls that like the worst sin in a monastery is grumbling and complaining because it's so divisive. That is a sin also immediately connected to gluttony. Because in gluttony, we want to take in, we want to receive, we want to have. And when we don't, we complain about it. We find an excuse to say badly about someone or something. But if we simply say, this is what's before me today, I might not like it. And trust me, not all the food I get in the monastery is very tasty. But I sit and eat it. And I'm grateful to the people who prepared it for me. And that I get to eat every day. I mean, I'm a monk. Well, I live a better life than a lot of people. It's crazy. So gratitude also can help push against gluttony of place and quality. And finally, gluttony of time. This is maybe really hard because it's like, well, I need something right now. Maybe you don't. The best thing to practice in gluttony of time is surrender. Surrender to God, saying, all right, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm desiring right now, but I'm going to say no. Because as Satan tempted Jesus in the desert with, turns these stones into bread, it wasn't the time. It wasn't the time for Jesus to break his fast yet. It wasn't the time for him to eat. And what does he say? Man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. So in those moments of temptation of, oh, I really want to eat something right now. It might not be the best place. It might not be the best time. Say, you know what? God, sustain me by you. Give me a word that I can hold on to. The word became flesh. We eat flesh in meat, right? So hold on to the word, something from Scripture, something from Christ, something from a church monastic father. Hold on to it and let that sustain you. And also offer it up. Fasting is a great way to grow in relationship with God and others because it's denying yourself. And the more we deny ourselves, as Jesus says, we can take up our cross. So if we deprive ourselves a little bit at times of food and drink, though we might want it or more of it, it can help us when the time comes to pick up our cross to not grumble and not push it aside or say later, not right now, but to take it up. I hope that helps and that maybe this has given you some understanding about the sin of gluttony and how monks and how you can even, as monks did, practice the virtues of temperance, self-control, and moderation in response to gluttony. Make sure you stick around for the next several Saturdays because next week we'll be talking about lust and following Saturdays, the other of the 7 deadly sins. If you received something from this video, I hope you could give us a like and comment what you did, and share this video with someone. If you want more monastic content, you can check out this video here about dealing with temptations in general as a monk would, and also this video here about how monasticism can help your marriage. Thank you for joining me. I'm Brother Francisco. For a wonderful day. God bless.